Mulla was walking down the road when he came to a high fence, and behind the fence he could hear the sound of scuffling. So being the curious man that he was, he climbed the fence to see a beautiful maiden in the arms of a ghoulish-looking monster. So besides being curious, he was quite a chivalrous man. So he jumped the fence and wrested the monster out of the arms of the beautiful maiden, and the monster went running off. So the maiden started to scream and shout and wail, and she called 2 hefty servants to come over and beat Mulla and throw him back over the fence for chasing away her lover. So Mulla lying on the side of the road, bruised and battered and bloody, thought to himself, well, there's no accounting for taste. And then after that he assumed a very severe limp and wore a patch over his eye. But he never attracted any beautiful maidens to him. So Wanho, at a very early age, saw his father being cruelly murdered by a neighbor. So Wanho harbored the revenge in his heart, and anger, which grew and grew in him as he grew older. But Wanho was a puny little fellow. He was hardly strong enough to lift a sword, much less wield it. And his father's killer was a great burly fellow called Weilo. And Weilo had a skin like leather that no swords or arrows could even pierce. So Wanho had no means of wreaking his revenge. It just seethed inside of him. But one day one of his friends said to Wanho, "Wanho, that Weilo treats you like a piece of shit. What are you going to do about it?" Wanho said, "I don't know." Well, his friend said, "I believe that there's a lord in a province far away that has a magic sword. Why don't you go and see if you can borrow it?" So Wanho fired up, made the long journey to this province where the Lord lived, and when he confronted the Lord, and he said he would indenture himself to him as a slave to be prepared for using this magic sword, and he'd leave his wife and children as surety if he could borrow the sword. Well, the Lord said, in fact, I don't just have one sword, I have 3 magic swords. He said the first one is called invisible light, and it has no shape or form, but it can sever a man from head to toe without him feeling anything. And then he said the second sword is called the shadow sword, and this sword can only be seen by its shadow. It makes a slight swishing sound when it's used, and it can pierce and sever a man without him feeling anything at all. And he said the third sword is the night sword. He said it cannot be seen in the night time. In the daytime, its shape and form can only be seen as a faint glow. He said none of these swords can kill, but the night sword will cause a wound that will close immediately and cause a slight pain. So Wanho chose the knight sword. And the Lord said, you don't have to indenture yourself or leave your wife and children as a surety, but there are certain rituals to prepare you to use this sword. So Wanho immediately began his fasting and to undertake the rituals that were designated to use this sword. So the Lord said, these swords have been in my family for many generations. They've never been used. So you will have to break the seal. And this Wanho was able to do. So taking the knight sword, he went back to his village. And that night he went to the house of Weilo, who was lying there in a drunken stupor. So Wanho lifted the sword and wielded it 3 times, slashing the throat and down to the belly of Weilo. And as Wanho was turning to leave, Weilo's son came in the door and greeted Wanho. So Wanho lifted his sword again and slashed it 3 times around the body of the son. And then he left. The next morning, Weilo woke up and shouted at his wife, "Why didn't you cover me through my sleep? I've woken up this morning with a sore throat and a pain in my stomach." And then Weilo's son came in and he said, "Strange, Wanho came into the house last night, and when I greeted him, he waved his arms around, and now I've got a headache and I'm aching throughout all of my body. Do you think he's put a curse on us?" But you know, Wanho knew that if he had have wielded a real sword and killed Weilo and his son, there would have been retributions in their families for an untold amount of time afterwards. But Wanho never thereafter had any anger in him, nor feelings of revenge. What's the deep meaning of this story? What are the symbols?
Up to the core. I feel whatever it is it's creating.
What's the deep meaning of this story with its symbols? Its sacred numbers also. Its implications.
that revenge creates its own cycle, and it's really the same as the other side of being attacked.
Yes.
And that the only way to stop it is to stop what's happening within you.
Yes.
And not to react.
Yes. Certainly. But there was an enactment, wasn't there, by Wanho? With this sword, chosen out of those 3 swords, which have their own meaning for us, he was able to enact without there being a great effect and complete the karma, or complete whatever we would like to describe it as. What does this mean for us?
So he picked the invisible sword.
No, he picked the night sword,
The night sword.
which made a slashing sound and could cause a wound that would immediately close over and cause a little pain. Whereas the other 2 swords caused no pain. The second, the shadow sword, made a swishing sound. The first sword of invisible light made no sound and could not have any shape or form. Just a faint glow for those who are able to see it. The shadow sword could only be seen as a shadow. They could sever a man from head to toe without them feeling anything.
But not kill them.
Not kill them. But the third one could cause a little pain and a wound that closed over straight away. And one who chose the third sword.
So it's like a symbolic thing that he's
Absolutely.
picked instead of causing revenge, like that pain in somebody else.
Yes.
That
He's released his anger. He's completed his karma by facing it and facing that man and enacting 3 slashes with the sun, and which of course are those sacred numbers. But just as a possibility, could it be that those 3 swords represent the levels of existence? You know, this invisible light sword could be this love. You know, if someone hurts us or does damage or kills our father or whatever, and we take it all up to that level of oneness and light, and do you see what I'm saying? When that sword represents bringing it to the level, well, you know, it's all God and blah, 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 blah. Or the second level, the occult level, the shadow level, that you use some occult powers, you know, send little jibes, or you know what I'm saying? Spell or something. But this night sword, he
had a physical impact, but very light.
exactly, right.
and it released him.
It released him. It released him.
And
And the other person.
And yes,
it kind of had an impact on the other person.
as well. That's right.
Like putting a boundary,
Yes. Yes.
but not much is needed to
No,
put a boundary.
because the son, by the son even saying, because the son was brought into it, you could say, "Oh, do you think he put a spell on us?"
So now there's doubts and fear, and they're not going to mess with him again.
That's right.
I think he's crazy.
Yes, 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 yes.
Yeah, it wasn't enough to release himself. Obviously,
No,
they also had to
yes.
have
Something
stopping,
stopping. Yes.
something
So
subtle.
you can see the deep and subtle levels of these stories if we think about it, and think about those 3 levels and those sacred numbers that come into it. But in significance for ourselves, to find out the deeper essence of what this story means, we have to really ponder on it a little more, don't we?